Hello everyone, welcome to our platform Passion for Biology. My name is Shaheed and today we are going to proceed with our topic homeostasis. In the previous discussion, we looked at sugar regulation, we looked at the structure of the liver, the antagonistic action of the two hormones, insulin and glucagon, and diabetes mellitus, the type 1 and the type 2 diabetes. We also looked at the first part of thermoregulation, and this is the part of the skin. And today we are going to proceed with thermoregulation. Now in today's discussion, we shall look at endotherms. Endotherms, sometimes called homeotherms, how are they adapted to different environmental conditions? The long-term adaptations and the short-term adaptations. We shall also look at the ectotherms, also their adaptation to different environmental conditions, long-term and short-term. We shall look at the concept of fever. We shall look at the role of hypothalamus in thermoregulation, as well as critical temperature, the lower critical temperature, the higher critical temperature, as well as the efficient range. Now, the temperature of the environment inhabited by most of the living organisms ranges between 90 degrees in very hot springs, as well as negative 40 degrees in Arctic. These are very cold environment. And such organisms that live in different environmental conditions, those that live in very cold environment, they have developed adaptations that have enabled them to survive in such very cold environment. Whereas organisms that also live in very hot environment, they have also adapted mechanism for survival in such environment. And all the mechanisms are intended to regulate heat, and living organisms regulate heat in two ways. They regulate the heat that is gained and the heat that is lost. And heat can be gained by a living organism by two ways. The first way is by metabolism of food. Metabolism refers to a series of reaction. Such reaction can either be catabolic or anabolic. Anabolic reactions are build-up processes. An example is protein synthesis. Whereas catabolic reactions are breakdown processes. A complex molecule is splintered into smaller monomers that can be utilized by the body. Such reactions include respiration, and during respiration, heat is released, and organs such as liver, which are among the most metabolically active organ, after respiration, the heat that is gained from respiration is distributed around the body by blood. In the same way, heat can be gained from the body by simply absorbing it from sun, absorption of solar energy. This can be either absorbed directly or indirectly. Indirectly, how the heat that is reflected from objects that are shiny can again be absorbed by what? By a living organism. Heat can also be simply convected from a body which is warm, like a rock, to a living organism, or conducted from the ground to the living organism. The ground is hot, conducted from the ground to the living organism. In the same way, heat is lost. Heat can be lost. Heat can be lost by evaporation, conduction, or radiation. Evaporation of water during sweating, conduction from the body to the ground, or convection from the body to air, radiation from the body to the air or water. Now, there are two factors that affect the exchange of heat. One of the factor is size. Size. The other is shape. Size. Organisms that are small, they have a large surface area to volume ratio. They have a small volume ratio and a large surface area, meaning that much of their body is exposed to the environment and they tend to lose a lot of heat. Such organisms have a higher metabolic rate and normally consume a lot of food. They consume relatively large amount of food. Whereas organisms that are huge, they are able to conserve heat because they have small surface area and large volume ratio. They have a small surface area and large volume ratio. Such organisms, they have less of their body exposed to the environment and normally don't lose a lot of heat. And also the concept of shape, we shall see some of the organisms have large body extremities, whereas others have small body extremities. Moving on from that, organisms are categorized in two ways. Some of the organisms are endotherms, whereas others are ectotherms. Endotherms are sometimes referred to as homeotherms. They are able to maintain a constant core body temperature, whereas others are ectotherms. Ectotherms, their temperature fluctuates with that of the environment but does not necessarily reach that of the environment. And ectotherms only have behavior mechanism of maintaining their body temperature. Now let's consider this graph. The horizontal axis shows the environmental temperature, whereas the vertical axis shows the body temperature. We have two living organisms. We have an endotherm, a deer, and an ectotherm, a tortoise, a reptile. Now, as the environment for the endotherms, for the ectotherms, as the environmental temperature increases, their body temperature also increases, as you can see that blue curve, this one. Whereas for the endotherms, they maintain a constant body temperature provided the fluctuation of the environmental temperature. And one of the advantages of being an endotherm is that such organisms are able to exploit different geographical environment. They can live in very cold environment as well as in the very hot environment, because they can simply regulate their core temperature. Moving forward, how do living organisms maintain constant body temperature in warm environment? They apply different mechanisms. Some of them are physiological, others are behavioral. And one of the mechanism is the mechanism of vasodilation or vasodilation. Vasodilation, we have blood vessels. The blood vessels that are near the skin, they are referred to as superficial blood vessels. Now, when the blood is too warm, remember it is the hypothalamus, a message is sent and the superficial blood vessels, they dilate so that much of the warm blood can pass via the skin, can pass close to the skin. Then heat can be rapidly conducted through the epidermis to the surface of the skin, where it is later radiated to the atmosphere. You can see in this diagram, one is showing vasoconstriction, one is showing vasodilution, another showing vasoconstriction. You can see this is a capillary bed. It has what you call a shunt right here and right here also. Now during vasodilation, the shunt constrict. In other words, the shunt is closed so that blood can pass near the skin and heat is lost. Another way by which heat is lost is by sweating. Normally sweat is produced from the sweat glands, and water is lost in the form of water vapor from the skin with a lot of heat, and the organism from that way the organism is cold. We also have what you call the erector pili muscles. Now if the organism is subject to the very warm condition, the conditions are warm, the hair erector muscles, the erector pili muscles relax. In other words, the hairs on the skin surfaces, they lay close to the surface, and this reduces the insulation layer made up of warm air, and the body heat is easily dispersed away. Alright, let's proceed. We have looked at how the body is able to maintain constant body, how organisms are able to maintain a constant body temperature in warm environment. One of the ways is vasodilation, where the superficial blood vessels that are near the skin, they dilate so that much blood flow close to the skin and then heat is lost from it. Then we have looked at the concept of sweating. Through sweating, the organism is able to lose heat and in the way that way the organism is cold. And relaxation of the erector pili muscles. Once the erector pili muscles have relaxed, the layer of heat that is normally trapped by these hairs on the skin is reduced. In that way, heat can easily be lost from the body. Another mechanism is behavior, and this mechanism is known as avestivation. It is a behavior mechanism, and this is normally hibernation. It is a form of hibernation, but hibernation during hot seasons. Organism can avoid the hot environment by sheltering either under rock or burrowing in the surface. Many of the desert animals they do this, and many desert animals avoid the period of greatest heat loss by being nocturnal. They are active during night. Another way by which organisms maintain a constant body temperature during warm environment is what we call panting. This is normally found in dogs. And in this way the body is the organism is cooled by evaporation. Let's proceed. Now there are long-term adaptation to hot environment. Long-term adaptation to hot environment, organism they develop large body extremities. I have placed two pictures. There are two pictorials. Both of them are fox. This fox, this one, fox number 1, have fox number 2. You can critically observe the pinna, the ears of this fox number 2. They are large compared to its counterpart, fox number 1. This one lives in very cold environment and this one lives in a hot environment. Animals in warm climates frequently have large body extremities such as ear compared to their counterparts that live in very cold environment. And one of the example is the fox that live in the Arctic fox and the African fox. This is the African fox, fox number 2, and the Arctic fox, the fox that live in cold environment. And these body extremities are well supplied with blood vessels and they are covered with short hair, and therefore heat can be lost from them by radiation. That's the importance of having large body extremities. Another way by which another long-term adaptation is the variation of the body temperature. One of the example, this is a nocturnal behavior that is normally practiced by camels. And how do camels practice this? Some of the desert animals allow their body temperature to fluctuate. It fluctuates, it varies with that of the environment, but within a specific range. By doing so, it reduces the temperature gradient between its body and the environment, and this delays the onset of what? Of sweating, and so help the organism to conserve water. Maybe let me repeat this. Variation of the body temperature with the environmental temperature. It is a nocturnal behavior that is practiced by the camel. And camel is a desert animal. It allows its body temperature to fluctuate with that of the environment. This reduces the temperature gradient between the body and the environment, reducing the onset of sweating, thus conserving water. Those are long-term adaptations. Now, it is vice versa. Maintenance of body temperature in cold environment. Vasoconstriction, so that you see here with vasoconstriction, the shunt is open. This is the shunt. The shunt is open so that less blood flows towards the skin and thus heat is not lost. Shivering. With the shivering, it is a rhythmic and involuntary contraction of the skeletal muscles during cold conditions, and during this process heat can be generated. Another way is the hairs, the rectopule muscles, they contract. Once they contract, they pull up the hairs, and this increases the thickness of the layer that is trapped by by the hairs on the skin, and this acts as an insulation. Less heat can be lost to the environment. Another way is many of the organisms they increase their metabolic rate, and the liver, one of the most metabolically active organs, is the liver, and during low temperatures, if the temperatures are low, there is increased metabolic rate, so that heat can be generated. We shall see how the thyroid gland influence metabolism. Now let's move forward. The long-term adaptation to survival in cold environment. Many of the organisms, they have a thick layer of subcutaneous fat. Aquatic animals, the mammals like the whales, dolphins, they have what you call a layer of subcutaneous fat, which is extremely thick and forms an effective insulation layer. In the same way, organisms, they have what you call small body extremities, as in the previous slide, the fox. Small body extremities, organisms that live in the cold, they have what you call small body extremities, so that less reducing the surface area, and thus less heat is lost to the environment. Now what I want to explain here is the variation of the superficial temperature and the core temperature. Actually, I talked about that. The superficial temperature is the temperature of the skin, whereas the core temperature is the temperature which is 2 centimeters from the skin. Now, some of the organism, they allow the superficial, they use a mechanism which is known as counter current heat exchanger. Heat exchanger, whereby the extremities of the animals, the extremities, for example the limbs, they are cold. The organism allows the superficial temperature to fluctuate with that of the environment, reducing the temperature gradient, but the core temperature remains as it is supposed to be, and this is achieved by a mechanism known as the counter current heat exchanger. This is achieved by a mechanism known as the counter current heat exchanger, which is normally found in the limbs of many of the birds and other mammals. Blood in the veins is supposed to be is the blood which is returning to the what? To the heart. And blood in the arteries, and this blood in the vein is normally cold. Whereas blood in the arteries is blood from this blood is hot. And with this mechanism, the heat from the arteries is transferred to the veins. Therefore, blood returning to the body is kept warm by that mechanism. Another way is what you call hibernation. With hibernation, during cold conditions, animals normally find it difficult to obtain food for generating heat. Therefore, cold conditions, they trigger animals to go into a deep sleep, where the metabolic rate falls to the minimum required for maintaining. Actually, the metabolic rate is reduced to the minimum, whereby it can only maintain the vital activities of the body, and this process is known as hibernation. The body temperature normally, that is it with hibernation. And here In this slide, we shall look at the role of the hypothalamus. The role of the hypothalamus in thermoregulation. The control of the body temperature is affected by the hypothalamus, and this is a small body at the base of the brain. Within the hypothalamus is the thermoregulatory center, which has two parts. The part for the heat gained and the part for the heat lost. All those are centers. And the hypothalamus monitors the temperature of the blood passing through it, and also receives nervous information from the receptors that are found in the skin. As we looked at the skin has thermoreceptors about the external environment, the changes in the external environment. Any reduction in the blood temperature will bring about changes to conserve what? Heat. And a rise in the blood temperature also initiates mechanism that help the body to lose what? Temperature. Now the anterior part of the hypothalamus is the one responsible for the heat lost. It is a heat loss center, and this is activated by an increase in the body temperature. If the body temperature increases, the heat loss center is activated. Once it is activated, this is what we call vasodilation, increase in sweating and panting, decrease in metabolic rate, decrease in the thickness of a layer by the layer of air by flattening the hairs. Actually, the hairs on the skin, they lay flat so that less of the hair is trapped. And the posterior lobe, the posterior part of the hypothalamus, is the heat gain center, and this is normally activated by nerve impulses from cold receptors in the skin, or a decrease in the temperature in the core temperature. And the moment it is activated, this is what we call vasoconstriction. Sweating is reduced, metabolic rate is increased, and the erectile muscles, there is contraction of the erectile muscles, so that a layer of air there is an insulation by trapping thick layer of air, thus less of the heat is lost. Now let's look at the concept of fever. The concept of fever. Fever is simply the sudden rise in the blood core temperature, and this normally comes, it is a defense mechanism. Some of the disease, okay, let's go back to the slide. Fever is what we are going to look at with this slide, and the role of paracetamol. Paracetamol, they are a group of drugs. We shall see an example. One of the example, Panadol. Yeah, and their importance, and the disadvantage. Fever is simply the sudden rise in the core temperature of the body, and some of the diseases produce an increase in the core temperature, and this is known as fever. What happens is that the thermostat in the hypothalamus is usually set at a higher temperature. How? When a pathogen invades the body, it secretes a very toxic chemical known as pyrogen. they go in the temperature control center in the what in the hypothalamus, and the body core temperature is set at a higher temperature, and the body continues to feel cold until that temperature is attained. And the moment the these toxins are secreted and they set the thermostat in the hypothalamus at a very high temperature, it triggers a defense mechanism that comes and invades and fight against these pathogens, meaning that fever it initiates a defense control mechanism. And the reason why someone feels chilly or cold during fever is because that the hypothalamus is being set at a high temperature and the body continues to feel cold. Now, some of the drugs, the like the paracetamols and aspirins, these drugs, they can lower the body temperature, and this is important. It has it has a merit and a demerit. One of the importance, it is that it helps an individual to feel relieved from the unpleasant symptoms of fever. During fever, you feel like you are too cold or that you feel chilly that way. Now, the paracetamols, they have that advantage, but their disadvantage, they slow the defense mechanism of the body. That is fever. That is the concept of fever. Now, let's look at what you call the critical temperature. What is the critical temperature? There is a graph that I wanted to draw here about critical temperature, and this is our last slide. Let me draw it here. And there is here a graph which is here. We see, let me draw this and this and this. This is down here. It is the environmental temperature, metabolic. Here there is metabolic rate. Let me get another color right here. Lower, here there is what you call lower lethal temperature. Then there's lower critical temperature, higher critical temperature. Yeah, we shall use it. I don't know whether it is understandable. Yeah. This graph can be found in a book known as Understanding Biology by Susan Toole. Now let's the effect. Let's look at the effect of changing the environmental temperature. When a naked individual is put in an environmental condition of 29 degrees and the temperature is gradually reduced, the body, in the first place, the body uses purely physical mechanism to maintain a constant body temperature, and the metabolic rate remains unchanged. Altogether, an organism is put at a room temperature, which is 29, and then from there, after this organism is put in a cold environment, they start lowering the temperature gradually. The organism uses purely physical mechanism like shivering, such as shiver. Altogether, the erector pili muscles do contract so that a layer of heat can be trapped. Yeah. But it reaches a moment whereby the physical mechanism cannot work and the metabolic rate starts to increase. And however, in the first place, the body you are put at a room temperature, then the temperature starts to be cold. Put in a refrigerator, it is switched on. The body first uses physical mechanism. Then it reaches a point when the physical mechanism cannot cope up with the decreasing temperature. And at a lower environmental temperature of about 27, the physical mechanism could fail to maintain a constant body temperature on their own, and the metabolic rate starts to go up, and this is called the lower critical temperature. The lower critical temperature, a temperature at which the physical mechanism alone cannot regulate the body temperature. And when the external temperature, from the lower critical temperature, when the external temperature further decreased, the metabolic rate continues to increase until the chemical mechanism also breaks down, which is a time when the metabolic rate, which refers to a chemical mechanism, also breaks down, and this is called the lower lethal temperature. Lower lethal temperature, when the chemical mechanism cannot regulate the decreasing body temperature or environmental temperature, and at this point the individual dies. Let me again do this graph. The graph is like this. This is an environmental temperature. At the vertical axis, metabolic rate, let me just put M. This is, we are decreasing. At first, this is what we call the efficient range. When we start to decrease, going this side, we reach at what we call the lower critical temperature. Here, efficient range. Efficient range is the range of temperature over which the body's physical mechanism are capable of maintaining a constant body temperature. It is here, this one. It is what we call the efficient range. Then we reach at this point, when reducing, we reach at what we call the lower critical temperature. Here, lower critical temperature, L. Let me just put L. Here, the physical mechanism cannot regulate, and the metabolic rate starts to increase. Metabolic rate will start to increase from here. It increases. Then it reaches a time where the chemical means cannot regulate the decreasing environmental cannot regulate the body temperature. And this is what we call lower lethal temperature, whereby even the chemical means cannot regulate. Now, there's what you call high critical temperature. When an individual is put at a room temperature and the body temperature, when the environmental temperature is increased, actually, let us begin with this is what we call high critical temperature. High critical temperature Let's look at another range. This is the efficient range and high critical temperature. What happens if we are to increase the temperature from the efficient range where the physical mechanism can work? When the environmental temperature is increased, the body first uses various mechanisms to promote heat loss, and the body reaches and there comes a point when the ability of the body to regulate its temperature breaks down. This is what we call the high critical temperature. It is that high temperature where the ability of where the body cannot regulate the what? Cannot regulate the increasing temperature. And once the high critical temperature is reached, the metabolic rate instead increases and goes up. Now, once the higher critical temperature is reached, the metabolic rate simply increases. It increases. Let me get a red pen here. The metabolic rate simply increases. This is the higher critical temperature, and this is the low critical temperature. This is the efficient range. Let me put E. Why? Because the body's cooling mechanism, they fail. The body's cooling mechanism fail, and the chemical reactions in the cells become subject to the what? To the temperature rule. How does the temperature rule works? Every time the metabolic rate increases, the increase in temperature increases the metabolic rate, and normally every time the temperature the metabolic rate is doubled every 10 degrees. This is what we call the 10% rule. Every 10 degrees the metabolic rate is simply doubled, and the metabolic rate goes on increasing even if the environmental temperature is no longer what? Increased. This is because every time the metabolic rate increases, it generates more heat, which raises the metabolic rate a bit more, and so on. And this is one of the example of positive feedback. And the body temperature continues to increase, and this is followed by death at what we call the upper lethal temperature. Yeah, that is it. Thanks for attending. My name is Shaheed. For any inquiry, you can simply inbox me for any inquiry or clarification or any correction or any supplement. Yeah.